Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for joining the IURC North America webinar on circularity in the built environment, which is part of the activities of our thematic network on circular economy. My name is Jacinthe Séguin, and as the practitioner supporting the activities of the circular economy thematic group, I will be your moderator for today. True to the mission of the IURC as an initiative focused on cooperation between cities and regions to advance innovations and sustainable urban development. I'm very happy to see network participants from all over Canada, the United States, and Europe today, and also welcome a few others. So we look forward to your insights and questions. I have a few housekeeping notes before we begin. You will notice that participants' microphones are muted. This is to ensure a good recording quality for the webinar. We will be posting the recording, the presentations, and a summary fact sheet on our website after the webinar, so you can sit back and listen to our excellent speakers without needing to take a lot of notes. The second thing is to keep things simple. The chat is our main communication tool where you can reach us, ask questions to our speakers, and also, I will be directing the various questions to each of them at the end of the session. So you can interact with us through the chat. And as we get started, I encourage you to introduce yourself and where you're from in that space. In the meantime, I am very pleased to introduce Ms. Monica Norcute from the European Union delegation to Canada, who will provide some opening remarks. Monica, over to you.
Thank you, Jacinthe, and good morning, everyone here in North America, and good afternoon, everyone in Europe, and a very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the European Union. As Jacinthe just mentioned, I'm a program officer based in Ottawa at the EU delegation to Canada, and I work actually for the European Commission. As you may know, it's the European Union's executive body where we develop policies, manage funding, and support international cooperation, including in urban and regional development. And we are very pleased to host the second webinar of the Circular Economy Thematic Network, and it's very great to see strong participation from cities and experts across Europe, the United States, and Canada. Just a few weeks ago, we were very proud to host a networking event in the margins, but also to participate in the Canadian Circular Economy Summit. And we believe that the event really highlighted how essential the collaboration is to accelerate the shift to circular models. And that same spirit of partnership brings us together again today. The EU has recently launched a new competitiveness policy, which aims to build a greener, more resilient, and more innovative economy. Circularity is at the heart of it, not just as an environmental goal, but also as a source of a long-term growth and quality jobs. Cities are, of course, key players in this shift, and the built environment offers huge potential from circular construction to more sustainable housing. Local governments are, of course, leading the way with real, on-the-ground solutions. Today's discussion, we hope, will highlight practical tools that will be very useful for you, as well policies and examples from both sides of the Atlantic. And we are very excited to hear how cities are putting ideas into action. And thank you to our speakers from Europe and North America for your time and insights, and to all of you for joining this conversation. We are looking forward to continuing this exchange through the upcoming IURC activities in the remaining of the year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica, for supporting these collaborations and for your remarks today. Now to our main speakers. We're very fortunate to have several experts with us today, including our special guest, Carolyn Kovar, Senior Policy Officer, Housing and Real Estate from the City of Atlanta. Welcome, Carolyn. And she will share her thoughts on the presentations and how Atlanta is approaching this challenge during, well, not during, but after our speakers' presentations. We will also, I'll remind you that we'll have a question and answer session after the presentation, so you can get your questions ready, and I will remind you to write them in the chat for our panelists, and then I will direct them to the speakers at the end. Our first speaker is Lisa Graff from the Buildings Performance Institute Europe. The Institute is a leading European think tank with offices in Brussels and Berlin, specializing in research and policy advice to support a decarbonized and socially just built environment. LISA's main areas of expertise include whole life carbon policies, and closely related to that, sufficiency, including the impact mechanisms and policies in the building sector. She firmly believes that learning and the exchange of best practices are key to driving progress. Lisa, over to you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And as BPIE was introduced already, I don't need to say anything more about that. I'm really happy to share our insights and our thinking on prioritizing the existing building stock. And maybe you can move now to the title slide. And what we also call sufficiency, and why this is innovative and why it fits to circular solutions and this webinar. So now the agenda is what I will talk about. I will briefly introduce sufficiency and then summarize the findings on the impact. So the why should we take it seriously, why should we focus on it? And this is based on literature and our own case studies. And then I will end with some remarks and what we should do. So the recommendation part. So on the next slide, as this webinar is on exploring circular solutions, I thought I start with something that most of you, if you are from the circular economy or circular built environment community, that you will know. So the circular economy principles, we have the waste hierarchy or principles of a circular economy. So from most preferred to least preferred, and in many variations, some with more steps, slightly different names, but all with prevent, refuse, or avoid is the most important step or most preferred principle or strategy from an environment perspective. And sufficiency is kind of zooming in to that strategy or this avoid strategy. It's defined as a set of measures to avoid the demand. This is from the IPCC report in 2022. So sufficiency goes a bit beyond also this prevent and refuse avoid that we have from the circular economy principles, because it has an additional dimension. It has a social foundation, and I will get to that on the next slide. But if you can also just go one back, because I wanted to make one more remark on this one, because we have the social foundation, which I will explain just in a second. But then also I think this additional dimension is that we don't look at the individual building level only, but also the building stock perspective with the sufficiency approach. Because the best strategy from a climate perspective is to stop building new immediately, but we also have societal goals, housing needs, and this is why we need to look at what we have, the existing stock, at least part of the solution to provide affordable homes. So now you can go to the donut graph. Thank you. So like I said, the concept embodies a dual dimension, or we also say two types of enough, because you have both, you have a minimum and a maximum standard. So sufficiency as a minimum ensures decent living standards for all. So this is the social foundation. While then sufficiency as a maximum ensures or calls for avoiding unnecessary energy and resource consumptions to stay within the limits of planetary boundaries, so the ecological ceiling. You have the social foundation and you have the ecological ceiling. And in between is the safe and just space for humanity. And I think this dual dimension illustrates, if you apply it into the building stock, that it can be adjusted to meet the specific needs of countries and cities. It will mean different things in different contexts. For some, it means more floor area. For others, it might mean to think about real needs, what it means to provide good living quality for all, and right size or downsize, and make better use of what we have, and do this within the planetary boundaries. Now, the next slide, you saw the pyramid from the waste hierarchy. Now here again, this illustrates what sufficiency means in the building sector. Also, from most preferred, from a climate and environment perspective, is the preservation and renewal of existing buildings. That should always be the top priority, followed then by the expansion of existing buildings. And sometimes, especially also beyond Europe, it will mean also new construction guided by sufficiency principles. And then actually there should also be one step in the most preferred, which is sharing invisible living space. You will hear about that when I get to the examples. And you may say that this is somehow also a common sense approach, but somehow it also seems radical because it goes against the, how can I say, like the mainstream or the norms, our current economic model, which is very much focused on building new and starting with this. So next slide. What we know about the impacts. Let me summarize some of our main findings when we looked into the literature and also from our case studies. So next slide, please. This is a bit a tricky part for me because this slide is a slide I could probably talk really an hour about. Somehow intuitively and common sense, you agree that there must be relevant greenhouse gas savings, resource savings, etc. So if we reduce absolute demand for energy and resources by applying the pyramid of the previous slide, but then we also know that we need numbers, and luckily there is a growing body of studies and reports on sufficiency in general. But I can't dive into the details here. I listed the studies, and you can also find most of them in our BPAE report and the report that we did for the EU Commission on sufficiency. But let me tell you that the evidence is clear that there is huge saving potentials or greenhouse gas saving potentials, while then at the same time it can really help to save resources. So studies show about 60% less resources compared to scenarios where you would need new construction, because you need materials for conversion, renovation, but much less than for if you build new. Literature also shows that by using the existing stock, at least in a theoretical or most optimistic scenario, if you make use of all levers, that this can help to meet housing targets and provide enough homes without building new at all. And then on the finance side, just recently, so this is not included in our report, but there's evidence that urban regeneration projects, that they hold also huge investment opportunity. They talk about a staggering number of 4 trillion over the next 15 years. And then I always highlight this because I think it's very important, the social acceptance. There's also research on this aspect of sufficiency measures, which can be summarized in a nutshell. It's higher than one would expect, especially than policymakers think citizens would accept. And I really recommend also to, this reference is included in our report to really read it. It's very, very interesting. Now, next slide. I had mentioned some studies with estimates and quantifications. Now, what we did in a small project for the European Commission for DT Environment is to analyze 5 existing initiatives in several member states and look both at the quantitative and also the qualitative impacts. And we had selected 5 cases with the aim to have both different sufficiency mechanisms as well as also a broad geographical coverage. So talking about Europe. So we looked at the Belgium Un Toit d'Usage, so One Roof, Two Generations initiative. And they connect people for shared housing arrangements, so providing this, what we call invisible living space. And I try to illustrate the mechanisms. I think now you need to click, then it will appear, or twice even, because you see here a bit the illustration. You have a large home, you have empty rooms, and you sublet them. So there's no refurbishment needed, but it provides a new home for someone. Then the second, the France national plan to identify and address vacancies. What the French government in co-creation with the regions and municipalities did, they linked several data sets. They identified the vacancies and established a platform and tools for municipalities to reach out to homeowners of those vacancies and bring it back to the market. So the mechanism is you have an empty building and you bring it back to the market. Then third, a program in Germany, which translates to turn one into two or more. A program in the southern federal state in Germany, Baden-Württemberg. And they offer free architectural consultations on splitting single-family homes, very common in the region. So for example, a couple, kids moved out a long time ago, they feel their garden is less pleasure but burden. keeping the house clean is also getting cumbersome. So that was the inspiration and what the initiator of this pilot program found on the ground. So she came up with the idea to offer consultation for conversion of those homes, to initiate a thought process and make people think about how you can improve your living situation, while at the same time providing new rooms, for example, for a young family looking for affordable housing. Then we have Poland's empty space. Sorry, no, I go quickly through the last two examples. So Poland's empty space is a project focusing also on mobilizing vacant properties to house homeless individuals. And then the last one in Ireland, that's a project on repurposing vacant office space for affordable or social housing. Now, next slide, please. So it's the same table, but more columns. Also here, I can't go too much into detail, but what we did in very short, so the last three columns, we based our calculations on the analysis of the initiatives. We had interviews and collected data, and we have translated the data into assumptions about a safe living space. So how many units have been converted, how many rooms sublet in the dense student cities in Belgium, how many vacancies brought back to the market. And we then compared this to average construction related emissions for an equivalent area of new build construction. And we see there is really high potential, and you will also see, we just looked here at greenhouse gas saving potential. Now, next slide. When we combine the different sufficiency mechanisms and the theoretic potential we estimated, so if this were scaled up, and this is just for illustration purposes, but it still shows that we could free up more space than is required to be built each year. Next slide. And I also always like to highlight this because quantification numbers is very valuable and very much needed. But when we talk with interview partners of the initiatives and analyzed the documents about what has been achieved or why they initiated it, one very interesting finding was that none of those initiatives have been done with climate considerations in mind, or at least this was not in the forefront, which was our starting point, so to say. But they mention a whole lot of other benefits and main motivations to launch it, for example, to combat loneliness and provide affordable housing for students, community building and intergenerational exchange. They mention preservation of historic and cultural value, revitalize regions like France plan to combat vacancies, to comply with land use targets. And they also mentioned, for example, the avoidance of, to avoid additional infrastructure costs for municipalities, because new infrastructure comes with associated embodied carbon. And if you don't build new on the greenfield, but if you stay within the existing structures, you save that from a municipality's point of view. And then I could also add capacity building on how to handle vacancies that was within the France plan. But yeah, I see time's running. So I think this is the last slide already. So our recommendations. Yeah, thank you. So data collection is the first and most important point to start with. Ideally, every member state, every municipality, every country has such a mapping that we are aware of the potential, and this can support decision-making, what to do with this vacant spaces and how to tackle it and bring it back to the market. Then the second thing is to prioritize and incentivize the already there. So the existing building stock, it would really be important to streamline national funding and land use planning and shift this paradigm and get the framework right. And then what we also heard a lot when we interviewed the initiatives on the ground is that they all wish to learn from each other, to understand what works and what does not work. Something like an inventory or also a platform to really facilitate this exchange. And then there are many entry points for sufficiency. I think this is also important. One can be climate. This was our entry point through this whole life carbon perspective. But then we also heard this is often not the main motivation for initiatives on the ground. So there's also the much talked about housing crisis and the topic of affordable housing. Then there's everything related to environment policy, so resource savings, land use targets. And I think this is really a strength of the efficiency policies, that your main motivation can be to combat loneliness, and therefore you want to make sharing more easily accessible, and you would have the benefits of greenhouse gas savings. And so I think this is really about forging alliances and work beyond the silos. And it's a strategy to address multiple crises, so kind of hand in hand with different communities. And then lastly, I know there are people out there that have researched on the topic of sufficiency and advocated also for it quite some time. But we also need more research on the qualitative and quantitative impacts. Yeah, and on the last slide, there are some of our publications related to the topic of whole life carbon and sufficiency. If you're interested, feel free to download it. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Very interesting. I will give now the microphone to Carolyn Kovar from Atlanta, someone that is working on the ground and that is, these initiatives, we have all these expectations and hopes of what cities can do. So perhaps you have a few reflection on what Lisa just presented. And over to you.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. So I'm happy to be here today to learn from the experts in the room, just such excellent data. From the Atlanta perspective, we're working most readily on the first two of the recommendations that Lisa shared. So I did want to share those reflections. The first is how to utilize data to understand what the portfolio of the built environment in your city is for redevelopment. So we have partnered at the City of Atlanta with a data tool, Ptolemy, which a number of other municipalities have also partnered with. They actually created a data tool which maps out the vacant single family properties, as well as those that have interim action or demo lien action. So that's a tool that a policy mechanism that we have as a city to take back those vacant parcels and either demolish them or ideally just retrofit them and put them back onto the market. So we are very excited about how that data tool can help us to create, unique tailored policy strategies to bring those single family properties back online. We also have been partnering with our land bank. They've been working with us on how to, take their portfolio of properties that they have, retrofit them, and then return them to the market. So that's a really exciting area. The second is, how do we preserve larger multifamily or other sites of interest? The good news is that one silver lining to the current economic challenges we're facing and the tariffs is that it's becoming more and more attractive as even an economic option to restore existing building stock as materials skyrocket. Even folks that were not proponents of that are now, learning about the benefits. So we're working with a bunch of our public partners to bring sites like schools back online that have, since been shuttered and closed, but how do we refurbish those schools into housing, into commercial space? And the same with office buildings. How do we take office buildings and then refurbish them as housing? So we have a number of really exciting projects coming down the way, but we're learning that not only are these projects better from a sustainability perspective, you're diverting all of those materials from the waste stream, but it's a great way to build community buy-in and support. A lot of these buildings are their landmarks, catalysts in the neighborhood. Especially we're working on an old Constitution building. It's a beautiful brick structure. It's a catalytic landmark. And so being able to restore that building, not only it diverts waste, it's economically more viable, but also, it creates that unique neighborhood character by preserving those beautiful buildings that everyone knows and loves. So there's a number of really exciting things happening both on the single family scale and then multifamily commercial in this space. So very exciting time to be working in this.
We
My
will be
question-
coming back to you. We will be coming back to you. I will keep your question, and then I will introduce Helen, our next speaker, because I want to make sure we do have time for everyone to present. So our next speaker is Helen Goodland, an architect and principal of SciUS, a Canadian research and data company focused exclusively on the built environment. Within SciUS's broad range of specialization, the circular economy has become increasingly important. And over the past 5 years, they have been working with the Canadian Standards Organization, the Circular Economy Leadership Canada, the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment, and others to promote circularity in building, construction, operation, and use. Helen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jacinth, and good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to those of you in Europe. I'm speaking to you from the west coast of Canada in Vancouver. So yes, we have been working a fair bit over the years in the world of sustainable materials management, which is kind of the precursor of circularity, but now more so into trying to sort of put our arms around the whole challenging area of circularity in the built environment. So this slide sort of shows you a few of the organizations that we've worked with over the years. And we, yes, we get involved in research and policy development and regulations and standards, but I think it's also important to say that, you know, a very large part of what our company does is get out into the field and document actual case study projects, and, you know, see how things get put together. So we are a team of architects and engineers, technologists, as well as data and business people as well. And we do a fair bit of carbon risk analysis too, which I think helps to support the business case for circularity. So what I thought I'd do today, just with the very limited time that I have with you, is just to sort of dip into a couple of our recent projects in terms of what we've been finding out about the state of play related to circularity and its implementation in projects and in cities, and then show you a few of the sort of examples that really strike us as pivotal and groundbreaking. There is no way that in the time I have that I can go through, you know, just this, you can see 3 of our recent documents, but I will put links to them in the chat at the end of my presentation so that you'll be able to sort of see them. And they are extremely rich resources for what's going on in the world of circularity, where some of the leading organizations, cities and communities might be at, and some of the challenges and opportunities there. So what you're going to get today is just a little taste. Next slide. When we talk about circularity in the built environment, we take a very practical view. So I think definitions is something that we struggle with in this area. But you know, we're looking at the life cycle of the building primarily, from when it is designed, when it is built, some of the life extension strategies, and then what happens when we're trying to close the loop back so that those resources that are in the building are retained for the sort of highest and best value future and subsequent lives. Next slide. So we have really been looking at a lot of these projects through the lens of what's happening in Canada, but I hope that there's resonance with most jurisdictions. So it's important, I think, to just set a little bit of context about, you know, how is the regulatory environment embracing circularity? What are the tools and levers that we have to start to, you know, adjust and drive change? And in Canada, we have primarily the building codes, and those cover both new construction and retrofits to some extent. I could probably spend an hour about the issues and challenges of retrofit codes and the extent to which they actually help or hinder circularity, but they sort of cover those areas and those life stages of the building. But when it comes to end of life and closing the loop, the regulations tend to be administered at more local levels. And here is where I would say it is, there's all sorts of different approaches, metrics, definitions, what's included, what's not included, how you calculate, how you don't calculate. So I would say that something that we have found over the years is it is really important to start to focus on the end of life and closing the loop areas of the building life stages from a regulatory perspective. It's the hardest part for sure. Next slide. So within that context, something that we have been doing with the Canadian Standards Association over the last 5 years is really trying to understand the role that standards play to inform and support those regulations, both at the national scale with all the building codes, but also at the local scale with the waste management and end of life. And we've looked at probably over 250 standards now that relate to buildings. And this is just CSA. You know, there are 50 other standards organizations, each with their own roster of standards, ISO, ASTM, ASHRAE, BSIs, the British standards that, we're finding that's percolating into North America as well. So this is an enormous task, but it does really give regulators the tools they need to start sort of explain what it is they're looking for when they talk about circularity. Next slide. The state of play in Canada right now, again, I think is probably fairly similar to most places. On the one hand, it's very encouraging. There are quite a bit of actions going on to embrace circularity. I would say that most of the leadership is coming from the municipal and regional level, but nevertheless, we're seeing quite a lot of things going on from, updating of building codes, digitization of codes to make it easier for architects and engineers to engage efficiently with the regulatory world. There's just a whole host of different green building policies that touch on waste management and reuse of materials. We're seeing increasing emphasis on embodied carbon guidelines. The city of Vancouver, for example, has got some really important groundbreaking, I would say, in some cases, policies around and regulations around embodied carbon reporting. There's a lot of deconstruction policies, voluntary programs, green materials policies. We have a Wood First initiative here in British Columbia, but there's also the local level, low carbon concrete requirements in some cases. I could go on. I think the point on this slide is it's still a bit scattershot, that there are a lot of different things all happening. They're not necessarily talking to each other, and they're not necessarily taking a sort of a joined up approach. So from the industry standpoint, it's really hard to know where to start. It's a little bit, green procurement may be defined one way over here. It may be defined a different way over there. So I think the point to take away is that we still lack a sort of aggregator and a consistent voice and a consistent definitions when it comes to circularity in Canada. Next slide. So building on that point, the gaps and challenges that have come out of most of the research that we have done really can be boiled down to these 6 topics, and they're huge topics. So the technical issues, the use of non-standard materials. This is a standards issue, but it's also a capacity issue, a knowledge issue, a markets issue. There's a lack of data. We don't benchmark our buildings in terms of what is the carbon footprint of that particular building. And we also don't know what's in that building in order to know what value we can create from either keeping it and retrofitting it or decommissioning it and using the component parts. There's a lack of consistent metrics and definitions. I've talked about that, and that point earlier about the lack of political alignment and governance. So we don't really have a centralized resource for industry, a front door, as you wish, to into the world of circular built environment for industry to say, well, where do we start? What do we do now? And so these the market barriers are also quite huge. Availability of materials, I need, if I'm a builder, confidence that I'm going to be able to find sufficient secondary material sources. So whether it's aggregates or lumber or, components, I need to be able to, confidently spec this. And of course, being so slow between when I specify something as a designer and when I need it on my project can be 6 months, a year, 2 years. And I still need to know that those materials exist. And of course, the standards gap. So just to summarize some big moves, these are sort of big things that we have really found that regulators can start to think about over the coming, sort of weeks, months, years, decades, as they start to think about circularity in their jurisdiction. Is we in Canada, I would propose, really need to create a national waste management framework so that all the different jurisdictions are speaking the same language. We need to entrench the embodied carbon requirements right across all codes and practices. It's happening. The Canadian Building Code is starting to do this, but we won't see it really fully implemented for another 7 or 8 years. We need low carbon materials and so forth. So I want to get to some project examples. So the next slide, these are a few tastes of where we're at. And I know that there are there's an emphasis today on housing. So there's a really interesting program that is underway in Alberta where they are converting office buildings into residential. And this is really because both Edmonton, Calgary, and other cities have been struggling both with the 2008 downturn in the oil and gas market, which is where a lot of the headquarters are in Alberta, but also post-COVID, a lot of offices were really underutilized. So the Calgary office downtown development incentive program was launched in 2021, and it offers $75 a square foot that can go towards the conversion cost of an office building into residential. And they've done over a dozen projects so far. So this is a really good return on investment for the city. It's starting to see these conversions get underway. We also like, just as a sort of stretch goal, so those of you in Europe probably know this project, but Straubenhard is a small town in Germany that has fully embraced cradle-to-cradle principles. And they've just completed their first cradle-to-cradle project designed by Wolf Architekten. And if you go to the next slide, you'll start to see some of the the features of this project, which we think really need to be kind of promoted. And it's this notion of clean construction and the use of uncontaminated materials that have been applied to a very simple, rational, configured project. This means that at the end, during the life of the building, it can be really easily maintained. There are no contaminants that need to be addressed when the building is disassembled, and it has been designed for, all of the different components can be taken apart. It's bolted, not glued, so that all of those forever chemicals that you often find in buildings are, not a problem to deal with. I wanted to sort of talk very quickly about mass timber. This is a material that has really been gaining prominence in British Columbia, particularly. I would say Canada has become a leader in this, and it's been using mass timber. If you click on the video, by the way, in the top left, right, you'll be able to see the construction of this project on Beatty Street in Vancouver. This is putting mass timber extension on top of an existing commercial building, and it really helps to make the case for adaptive reuse, because mass timber is a much lighter material. And it's been done across North America. So there's another one in Washington, DC. Next slide. We have been promoting the idea of cities as a sort of convener of the ideas exchange. A project that we are leading on behalf of BC Housing is an exchange between the cities of Vancouver and Vienna, where there is a Vancouver house being built in Vienna and a Vienna house being built in Vancouver. And these projects are offering the opportunity for the two cities to share best practices in sustainable low carbon building. And this really is a precursor to circularity, that you've got very low carbon buildings and the opportunity to learn from different experiences. Next slide. So just to give you an example, the city of Vienna has been working to implement its DoTank solution. This is DoTank 2030, and this is really codified the reduction in consumption-based material footprint by 30%. So this is a really concrete solution to decarbonizing the city. And what Vancouver has done is taken those lessons from Vienna and applied it to a project in Vancouver. So Vienna House is a low carbon, and you can see here how sufficiently low carbon it is compared to a baseline building. So all the way to the right is the Vienna House carbon analysis, assuming that the biogenic carbon is included. The 1 second from the right is if it's not, but you can see how much less it is from a baseline building. So if you're starting to plan and you want to know where to start, something that we have been working on with major property owners, and of course cities and jurisdictions are also major property owners, is we've been using CREM, Carbon Risk Real Estate Monitor. And this is a really useful tool to help plan out the decarbonization strategy that if you've got multiple buildings, you can start to look at that portfolio in the context of the decarbonization commitments that your country or community have made through to 2050. So if you go to the next slide, we can benchmark your projects based on that CO2 emission reduction, whether you're working towards the 2-degree reduction target or the 1.5-degree reduction target as set out in the Paris Climate Agreement. So this, we've done this for a major property owner, and you can see, through to 2050, where all of the different projects essentially get to the point that the carbon emission costs and risks associated with it become so economically unviable in the markets that they operate. So if you have residential buildings, commercial buildings, healthcare, institutional, all of these things can be looked at, and they get to a point where they become so expensive to maintain because of the rising cost of carbon mitigation, that the building is, this is the point at which you need to have done that retrofit. And you can aggregate those impacts based on gross asset value, floor area, number of buildings, and so forth. But this gives you a really important sort of view on where you can start and what you can do. So thank you very much. I know that was an awful lot to get through. It just gives you a little taste, but I'm really happy to answer some questions, and I'll put some links to those reports in the chat. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Helen. And indeed, there's so much to dive into. And thank you for your perspective as a practitioner. And I would encourage everyone, we're running a little bit late, but not too much, but we had so much good information. I will remind you to introduce yourself in the chat, put your questions there. Carolyn is getting her questions ready, but I will go to Verle now, and then we'll open the floor for questions. And Carolyn, you can start the Q&A period for us. So our final speaker is Verle Lebrou, who works as a policymaker and facilitator for the public-private partnership Circular Flanders, which serves as a hub, inspiration, and matchmaker for the transition to a circular economy in Flanders. So she works mostly on the strategic agenda circular construction. This is why she's here today, and also on circular procurement. Among many of her projects, she coordinated a study on smart circular cities and is now exploring the possibilities of AI to accelerate the circular transition. So beyond Circular Flanders, she's also leading the circular procurement and circular built environment leadership groups of the European Circular Economy Stakeholders Platform. So Verle, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I don't see the slide yet. You can go to the next one. While I was listening to all the speakers, the next slide, please. I think in our website, I'll put it in the chat also, you can find many of those examples that were shown already. But today I just wanted to go through our reading guide that we created in the leadership group of this Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. Because, next slide, please, we find on this website, on this stakeholder platform, we work together with 24 organizations. And on this website, you can find cases, also strategies, but also once a month, around once a month, there are circular talks. And the presentation that I will give now very shortly is also much longer presented during this circular talk. So you can review this talk afterwards. Next slide, please. So this is our reading guide, and what happened in the beginning of the year with our leadership group, we thought it's important, much more people should think about circular construction, circular built environment, but why isn't it working? And then the idea was immediately, people don't know how to start, what to do, please let us make a guide to help people. And then when we were looking at what is already there, we saw that a new guide is not a solution. Every information is already written down, but what is important is to guide people throughout all this information. And that's why we decided to bring together all kinds of studies from the last 2 years. I saw today some studies that are not in there yet, so I would suggest to add them afterwards or put them on our LinkedIn group, because it helps people to give an overview. You can go to the next slide. So we started this guide with an introduction, because what is important besides the specific themes and detailed list of publications was to start with the beginning, namely the significance of the R strategies, and starting from the platform, from the goals where you want to go. And Circular Flanders, Ovam and Chris Blijkers have created this ambition chart. I already presented this in a previous webinar for you, but then it was a shorter one specifically for, or a general one for all product groups. This one is specifically for the construction sector. So it gives you a lot of strategies that you can apply to reach those goals. In the same introduction, we also refer to the new normal, and that is what Helen said, that it's important that we understand the same things, and that's why in the Netherlands, the Circle City, they created this guide to help organizations talk, say the same language, use the same language on circular economy. And in the previous circular talk of December on affordable housing, Bas from Cirkelstad has presented this publication, so you can see that too. Next slide, please. Then, of course, when we think about circular construction, we think in the first place of circular design, because this is fundamental if you start with something new, or even if you renovate a building, an existing building, we need to think about future use, about the strategies to use. And here are some of the examples. One that I worked on together with my colleagues in the one from Ovam, so it's all strategies with examples, as we saw before, from Helen also. Next slide. Yeah, as a next chapter is on efficient use of materials and resources. That is about the life cycle impacts and about sufficiency. And in the circular talk, you will get some extra information on the studies from the European Commission and the study that Lisa already explained, but also another one on BP, and also a fact sheet from the European Environmental Agency, Bureau, sorry. So you see that this topic is really high on the agenda for now. And if you want more information, just review that circular talk. Yes, next slide. Yeah, next slide. So I didn't know that Lisa was also going to present this case specifically. So you already received the information on this. So next slide, please. Yes, the next chapter is going into the materials and urban mining. And an example that we brought in this group was also a report of the Flemish Public Agency. It was published 1 month ago, Visum, and it is about the goal of the Flemish government to reduce the waste by 70% in 2013. And therefore, it was important to know what is the current situation, what recycling options exist already for non-stony waste, and how can waste from a construction or demolition site end up and in what conditions. So they looked into 16 waste types and looked at the different options. On the website, there are also other publications, of course. Yes. Next one is standardization. And also Helen referred to the standardization and to the ISO. It helps giving trust to owners of buildings and to governments in how to decide on the strategies to follow. So you have ISO on vocabulary, but also on guidelines for business models, measurements and evaluation, and product circularity data sheets. For the previous slide, there was one tool, because in this chapter, it's not only on standardization, it's also on tools. And a tool, the Consular tool was very surprising for me. It's an AI-driven platform that matches buyers' demand for construction materials with suppliers of circular materials. So I think it's such practical tools that we need. And then the next chapter is going into policy frameworks. There are many different publications, and one is created in the CCRI, European CCRI, together with the Flemish Association of Cities. And it gives a lot of examples and practical guidance to cities in how to go forward with the circular construction principles. One example that is given, there are many examples given, but one is a City Hall of Roeselare. And it's nice because you see how they integrated circular principles in their tender, but also how they kept their ambition throughout the whole construction phase and also in the use afterwards. So this is really a practical guide. On the other hand, during the circular talk, the EBC has talked about a guidance that they created for SMEs to match the requirements of the new European Construction Products Regulation, and also the links with circularity. On the top of this slide, previous slide, you see circularprocurement.be. That is our website. It's a website specifically on procurement. And for each product group, you can find ideas, strategies, but also links to standards or to cases or to publications. So circularprocurement.be. Then the next chapter, economic and environmental benefits. And during the circular talk, Nick Jeffries from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation presented a study on building prosperity, which gives or demonstrates the economic potential through more effective management of materials and the protection of and expansion of nature. Another study that was not presented in detail, but that you can read, it's also in English, is done by our CE Center, and it highlights the benefits of circular economy on climate targets via the introduction of an M level. In Europe, we have the energy level that housing and buildings need to be confirmed to, but this material level might give might help in reaching the goals. And for Flanders, for example, they looked at what the possibilities are, and it could approximately help to gain 146 kilotons of CO2 equivalents if they invest in more lower impact building materials. Yes. Then there is also a chapter on best cases, best practices. And Arnoud Everaert from ETH Zurich gave a presentation more specifically on the MOOC, the online course that everyone can look at on circular construction. And they also had several training educational programs. But you can also find all links of all publications in this reading guide. So if you have more time, you can check them. I will also put them in the chat. So the next slide shows who the speakers were of this circular talk and a link, a QR code to these recordings if you are interested, because now I went really quickly through it because of the time for the Q&A. And then the next slide gives an overview of, first of all, very important, if you have interesting publications or events, webinars that you want to share, you can do it yourself in our LinkedIn group from the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. There's a QR and the link to the reading guide itself. And then 5th of June, our stakeholder platform has also during the Green Week of the European Commission, there's an event where we'll also have some cases on construction, and you can also follow the live web streaming. So that might be also interesting.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Verle. I'm conscious of the time, and thank you very much to our three speakers. Now you have perspectives from a policymaker, a practitioner, an industry, and also from the research think tank community. So that's a lot of information to take in. I will turn over to Carolyn. If you would like to just launch one question, and I see also one question on the chat, and then we'll close and say goodbye to everyone. So Carolyn, over to you. Any questions?
Absolutely. So I'm coming from the policymaking perspective, working for a city government. So my question is directed for the policy angle. Specifically for Helen, I'm looking, you had an excellent slide about regulatory change and nationalization and standardizing definitions. So what steps can we take at a local level to advocate for more national reform? We're seeing, especially in the US, we are not as fortunate as Canada to have a federal government that's receptive at this moment. So do you have suggestions about how we can be empowered at the local level and empower more national practices? There's a lot to bite off there, so I apologize.
Yeah, and I would sort of, we tend to look with admiration at our European friends, because I think Europe has been doing a much better job than North America generally. So, I mean, what we've been doing is certainly the local jurisdictions and the provincial jurisdictions that are interested in this certainly have groups that they join to discuss with their federal counterparts. We have an organization called the National Research Council, which is a really good way to bring everybody who's interested in innovation in construction around the table. But I'm going to deflect your question, Carolyn, to Verle and Lisa, because I think these guys will have, good actual experience. We still are very much looking to them for guidance. So over to you guys.
Well done. Verle or Lisa?
Yeah, your question made me think, I mean, what we see, for example, with the whole life carbon regulation that is now embedded in the EPBDs, or the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, that was really also led by cities. So this leading by example, and then pushing kind of just by leading, also the national or European regulation. I think this is something you can, as a municipality, as a city, like always do, like forge alliances and lead together and show by by example, so to say.
Merle.
Yes, what Circular Flanders always did was we asked some money from our minister to give to consortia of cities together with the research institute, together with companies, for example, and then they had to experiment, and the bottlenecks, the difficulties that that occurred, those were the elements that we in our lever group tackled. So we try to find solutions and give recommendations for policy to change things, but always based on the practical experiments.
We had a similar question. Actually, I guess this was top of mind for our participants as well, because we had the question from Mary McSweeney about a comment that you made, Helen, that the construction industry did not have a door to engage with government and policy makers. And then, do you have any ideas on how that can happen? So I don't know if you wanted to add a few of your wish list items for Mary here.
Yeah, and great question, Mary. Thank you for that. I've been around the green building world long enough to remember when, the green building rating systems all started up. So that's probably 20 years ago now. I do think that as a means to engage industry, they had their drawbacks for sure. But, when LEED and Built Green and BREEAM and all of these things came along, they got everybody talking, and governments could start to use these as voluntary tools to affect change. And I do think that, it's a good starting point. We know that it's an interim measure, but I think that helps really craft the conversation. It can help governments put some incentive programs together to affect change, because I think that money speaks loudly to the industry. If there's ways to help deflect or de-risk, then that really helps a lot. So I think we need to think about how, and it for sure is going to be a crude means to do it. And I don't think that just embodied carbon policies go far enough. But I think that we need voluntary tools that can be incentivized and that are simple enough that you can check off. And I hate myself for saying this because I know that it limits what the potential is, but it just gets everybody started. And as a Carolyn, you're sort of nodding maybe, because I know Atlanta was one of the early adopters of all of this. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Okay, so let me give the mic to Carolyn for the last words. You have 30 seconds or a minute, and then I will be closing. Hopefully, our participants, you're still on the line, because we'll have a short survey for you afterwards. So Carolyn, a few last thoughts.
Absolutely. No, thank you all for the feedback and recommendations. I've been taking notes. But Helen, yeah, absolutely. Anytime that you can start to incentivize the market to move in that direction through carrots, we see that is typically very helpful. And it starts to build the market momentum around it. A lot of times you just the market needs to see a couple of demonstration projects to show how it can be done, how it can be structured, and that helps move that momentum forward. So that's absolutely what we're seeing as well. So thank you all.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'd like to thank all of you for sharing your experiences and your motivation. I'm hoping that the presentations and the information that you presented today will be a source of inspiration for our network and others also that will be looking into our information in the future. I hope that you agree with me that there's a lot to be inspired by, and that cities' action can really start new directions, and the transformation has started to happen. So I think we have a lot to be hopeful about. We've just posted the link to the survey in the chat. So if you would like to take a few minutes and give us your thoughts and help us also set the course for the next set of webinars, that would be very appreciated. And then I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today and for your participation. So thank you very much.